Truth unveiled here, and in case you haven't known, yes, you have no more rights, and that's just the darn truth. And today we're going to be talking about more of how they're stripping away the already rights that you don't have. And if you really think that Mr. Trump is going to come into office and make America great again, I'm sorry to tell you this, it's time to think again. Because now I'm here at Cato, and it says the Social Security Administration shouldn't be deciding who's too, quote, mentally defective to own a gun, nor should they indeed. Now, I briefly talked about this when I went over the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, that your lovely president, Mr. Obama, signed into office just recently, and how that strips away rights too. But now we're going to be talking more in depth about this bill and why it's so important indeed. Now, this says, unable to legislate new restrictions on what kind of arms can be sold, the government has embarked on a long-term effort of adding an untold number of Americans to the quote no buy list based on the unfounded conjecture that they pose a danger to others and deprive them of a fundamental constitutional right. The Gun Control Act of 1968 and the NICS Improvement Amendments Act of 2007, which we'll be talking about later, requires that agencies with pertinent records on who or who is not a mental defective disclose those records to the Attorney General so those people can be excluded from purchasing arms through the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or the NICS, and we'll be talking about that from the FBI's website later on as well. Why is this so important? Because if you're considered a mental defective, or if you consider to even have a mental defective according to your government, so that would include those who don't agree with the government, they can stop you from buying and purchasing a weapon and legally having one. But it gets much better, or should I say much worse, because then the SSA has proposed a new regulation that would create a process for transferring the records of those who seek a representative payee or a legal proxy under Social Security disability benefits programs to NICS so that they may be considered a quote mental defective and thus lose their Second Amendment rights. The proposed SSA rule is arbitrary. There is no evidence that someone who needs help with SSA paperwork cannot be trusted with a gun, and it's inconsistent with the regulatory and statutory scheme, not to mention blatantly unconstitutional. But when have they ever cared about the Constitution to begin with? That's why you're paying taxes on products and things that you don't even need to be paying taxes on. Because last I checked, the IRS is unconstitutional. There's no basis for us to be paying taxes. And let's not forget about student loans and all of these banking businesses and corporations that have these loans set up and are designed and by design to enslave us even more, because those are unconstitutional as well. But oh well, they don't care about that. They don't give a rat's behind about that whatsoever. But now we're here at the actual Social Security Administration that says implementation of the NICS Improvement Amendments Act of 2007. Now, like I said, I briefly went over this a few days ago, but now we're going to go over it a little bit more in depth. Now, one of the changes in the rules that they claim to be making in their summary, and mind you, they're the only ones making these rules, nobody else is, they're not getting approval from the people, and they're definitely not inquiring with the people to make sure that these laws can be passed like a government's supposed to do. But anyway, according to them and their final rules, they will identify on a prospective basis individuals who receive disability insurance benefits under Title II of the Social Security Act, or the SSI payments under Title 16 of the Act, and who also meet certain other criteria, including an award of benefits based on a finding that the individual's mental impairment meets or medically equals the requirements of Section 12 of the Listing of Impairments listings, and receipt of benefits through a representative payee. But why would they stop here? Soon enough, they're going to tell you that you need mandatory vaccines for yourself and your children, and anybody who does not agree is going to be seen as someone who is objective to what they deem is best and what they deem is right, and will therefore need to take preliminary measures. I'm telling you folks, that's where the agenda is headed. That's where it's going. Soon enough, they're going to control our lives like puppets, like they've already been doing in these draconian laws, as just a stepping stone to that. Now, it's interesting because this law law was written as of December 19th of 2016, and it's supposed to be effective as of January 18th of 2017. But what I find very interesting and suspicious indeed is the comments that are made and their responses to justifying such illegal actions, because now it says multiple commenters question our ability to declare an individual to be subject to the federal mental health prohibitor and argued that only a court can make that decision. We know darn well that the Social Security Administration can certainly not make that decision. Then they want us to believe that their authority to make such a decision derives from Section 10184 of the NIAA, and that the DOJ's guidance indicates that relevant records under the mental health prohibitor category include not only court adjudications, but also agency records of adjudications of an individual's inability to manage his or her own affairs, including the agency's designation of a representative payee because of his or her mental impairment. So that means the government can make decisions based on that person's behalf. That means the government has the right to make the decision instead of the person's family or someone close to the person. Oh my goodness, this is draconian beyond measure. Oh, but this is where it gets good, where they mention the Second Amendment and constitutional issues. And it says many commenters express concern that these rules would violate the affected individual's rights under the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which it would, and would also violate their equal protection rights under the Constitution, which it would. Most of these comments were provided in largely identical letters, and they asserted that our rules would take away firearms from elderly recipients of Social Security retirement benefits. And that's exactly what it's going to do, because when you take away the people's guns, when you take away their rights, and when you stage all these sandy hoaxes in order to do so, then you no longer have freedom for the people. Then the government's the one in control, and oh my goodness, that's the last thing that we need. But notice how they continuously bring up more draconian laws that they've already signed to justify their illegal actions, because their response is, with these rules, we are seeking to satisfy our obligations under the NIAA. What obligations? Which requires federal agencies, but they're not going to name them, to provide relevant records to the Attorney General for inclusion in the NICS. While the rule addresses reporting requirements, it is the Federal Gun Control Act and not the Social Security Act that governs when a person can possess a firearm. But why are these laws even governing anything when the Constitution still stands? At least I thought it did. The criteria we will use under these rules do not focus on one age group, such as the elderly or recipients of Social Security retirement benefits, nor do they categorize and treat individuals who are similarly situated differently. But it gets much worse, because when they bring up the constitutionality of their actions under the Second Amendment, they then quote the Supreme Court case in the District of Columbia versus Heller in 554 U.S. 570 back in 2008, and then they have the nerve to say, like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not limited. And then they say nothing in the court's opinion should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions of the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill. Well, then could you please start off and explain what the government's illegal action and how they're responsible for human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, and child trafficking on a daily, if not secondly, basis? And then can you also explain who's really responsible for 9/11 and all these heinous crimes and activities that are going on? Including these alphabet soups who are all in on the same agenda, but yet they have the nerve to talk about who they consider felons and mentally ill. What's even worse is how all of this was enacted to begin with, because according to the BJS, it says that the NIAA was enacted in the wake of the April 2007 shooting tragedy at Virginia Tech, even though we know the CIA and the FBI, they had a hand to do with all of that as well, just like they do with all these other alleged purported shootings across the nation, which of course led to the NICS Improvement Amendments Act of 2007, and then subsequently led to the background check system, and we'll be talking more about that system and its unconstitutionalities as well. And then, of course, we have our favorite, which is the FBI, and it's bad enough they're pushing fake narratives such as the false news propaganda, but now we have this as well. It's only going to get worse from here because now I'm at their website and it says National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or the NICS, and it says the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICS, is all about saving lives and protecting people from harm by not letting guns fall into the wrong hands. It also ensures the timely transfer of firearms to eligible gun buyers. Now, just to clarify, this is a great agenda that they're pushing because guns should not fall into the wrong hands. However, the way they're going about this is not the right way at all, and there's also statistics to prove that guns are not the problem whatsoever. Statistics show that there are way worse crimes than when it comes to guns. And when we see major things happening when it comes to gun violence and gun shooting, it mostly has to do with CIA-led operations and operations that come from the FBI, such as the Sandy hoaxes and all the other ones that make mainstream attention. But then it goes on to say, mandated by the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1993 and launched by the FBI back in 1998, NICS is used by federal firearms licensees, or FFLs, to instantly determine whether a prospective buyer is eligible to buy firearms. But how would they even know that? But then it says, before ringing up the sale, cashiers call in a check to the FBI or to other designated agencies to ensure that each customer does not have a criminal record or isn't otherwise ineligible to make a purchase. More than 230 million such checks have been made, leading to more than 1.3 million denials. But don't worry, your government and your president have a plan to make sure that gun violence is reduced and to make your community safer. And they're going to do so by removing firearms from the people as well as the little to no rights that we already don't have. And afterwards, they're going to make sure that they give the weapons to those who can be trusted, such as our military and government and even the police force, who will then be the only ones to use the weaponry come martial law, because newsflash, they already have drones and the technology already set up and already in place. Just look at the UN and how they've already legalized use of force in times of conflict. And we know that it's only a matter of time until that becomes a reality in America. Now, I also thought it was interesting from this fact sheet that was signed as of last year, new executive actions to reduce gun violence and make our communities safer. Now, if you actually read through this, you see that what they want to do is keep guns out of the wrong hands through background checks. And if you're in the business of selling firearms, you must get a license and conduct these background checks and then make communities safer from gun violence by limiting the guns and those who can attain them. Even though that's going to do the exact opposite and turn America into a surveillance state and bring about the New World Order system that's already in place, folks. It's already here. Little do we know. But then it goes on to say increased mental health treatment and reporting to the background check system, more spying and more surveillance indeed. The only problem, though, is that background checks are unconstitutional. Your government has no right to be administering them or enforcing them on anyone whatsoever. And the other major problem with this whole system that's set up by design is that they have surveillance weapons. Now they can track your weapons, they can track where you get them from, who you get them from, how much you're spending when they have no right to be doing that either, as well as the limitation on gun property rights from people like you and me. And this is all the beginning stages of a one world order and a new world order, the new world order system already in place, ready to go, and you can expect more of your constitutional rights and your Miranda rights to dissipate because you never had them. And you can especially expect this come martial law because it's even at the door. Please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha, because it's a matter of time until all of this becomes a reality and until They lock down the nation and only your government's the one in control because newsflash, they already have the executive orders where in case of a national emergency, your government pretty much owns and takes over the entire nation. And no, this is not an exaggeration. You can even look them up on your own time. And I've done plenty of reports and videos on that. And this is some real serious stuff indeed. What are they really getting ready for? But this is Truth Unveiled here, keeping you updated as always and saying as always, Shalom.